Hello, and welcome to the July 17th meeting of TV Toastmasters Club 9523. We'd like to welcome you to our meeting. I'd like to thank our guests in our studio audience, Tom Ziegler and Phil Barth, but also you guys looking in from home. If you'd like to find out more about our club, please log on to www.tvtoastmasters.com. We meet the first Thursday of the month at 6 p.m. and the third Saturday of the month at 10:30 a.m. I'm now going to ask our Toastmaster to come and kick this meeting off. Thank you.
I'm Emily Garrett, and I am your Toastmaster for today, and I will keep the meeting running on time. We have a great lineup today. We have two speakers. One is a guest from another club, which is always nice to have a visitor, someone we don't normally see in our club. And then we'll have, we also have Word of the Day, we'll have table topics, and I think that it's going to be really interesting today. So let's start with Word of the Day from Michelle.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. As grammarian, I will present you with a word of the day that I challenge you to use throughout your speaking portions of today's meeting, but I'm also going to be capturing those crutch words, those grammatical errors, to give you some feedback just so that you're aware moving forward. The word of the day is substantial. It's an adjective. It means of considerable importance, size, or worth. It also means concerning the essentials of something. A substantial amount of cash. I know we all want to be able to use that word when we talk about our bank account. There's also another use of the word. There was substantial agreement on changing policies. So please try to incorporate that word in your speaking today. And I'll also keep an eye out for those words that you're using in improper ways, or actually catchphrases or words that you use in a creative way, and give you feedback on that. Emily?
Thank you, Michelle. The next part of our impromptu session of the meeting is table topics, where our table topics master will give a question as a surprise to one of our members, and they will speak on their feet immediately when they get up here without having prepared anything. Our table topics master for today is Steve Ehrenholz. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, our honored guests, and those of you looking in from home. As Emily mentioned, this is a portion of our meeting where we practice our impromptu speaking skills. This is, for some people, a substantial achievement. Learning to listen, think, and speak on your feet. That question that comes along and you really hadn't been thinking about it at all, and you have to give a response. I have a few questions I'm going to ask today, and then I'm going to call on someone to give us a response. My first question: what life lesson did you learn the hard way? Rick Davis?
Well, thank you, Mr. Table Topics Master. What life lesson did I learn the hard way? I think all of them you learn the hard way. I think the hardest ones are money, related to money. You always think, oh, it's easy. Warren Buffett makes billions of dollars every year. What can be so hard about that? But then when it comes time to actually invest your hard-earned money, and you find out that not only does the stock market go up, but it also goes down. And if you look at it every day, it can be very stressful. So what I do, the life lesson I learned from that is that you only look at it about once a week, once a month, something like that, and hope that things have kind of gone up in the meantime. But that's one of the life lessons I've learned. Don't worry about money, because you're gonna lose it anyway.
Thank you, Rick. I know my wife tells me that when the stock market's going down and up, she says, well, don't look at it. And the other thing is, it's not for free. There's fees associated with it. The next question that I'd like to ask today, do you think crying is a sign of weakness or strength? Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Table Topics Master. Do I think weakness is a sign of, or do I think crying is a sign of weakness or strength? Well, you've all seen me cry on camera before, so I'm going to tell you it's a sign of strength. I think it's okay for people to be able to show emotions. I do think that there does need to be an ability to control your emotions in certain situations. So nobody wants to be crying in front of their boss all the time. Nobody wants to be crying in important situations where they need to, keep composure. But I also think crying is also a sign of your passion sometimes, and it shows your emotions, your devotion to things. So no, I don't think crying is a sign of weakness. I'm not going to cry today on camera, so I'll make sure I keep my composure. Being grammarian shouldn't force me to cry at all, but I know it is also something that I don't think is a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength and a sign of maybe uncovering your heart a little bit and being willing to show it to those around you. Mr. Table Topics Master?
Thank you, Michelle. I think you don't have to be crying either to be considered crying. I think it makes you much more genuine, because you've probably seen the situation where there's something and a person is absolutely emotionless, which makes you wonder, do they have any? The third question I have for us today, is it possible to lie without saying a word? Rick Barron? Is it possible to lie without saying a word, is the question.
Yes, absolutely it is possible to lie without saying a word. And you know why I know that? Because every once in a while you get that look from somebody. And that's all it takes, is a glance, a stare, a smirk, some other kind of facial expression that you know, that person is absolutely full of it. And all they're doing is trying to play to my emotions, trying to help me feel better by showing sympathy, showing empathy, showing something that we just know deep down in their heart, that's not who they are. That's not what they typically show. And you can tell just that little bit in their eye that the facial expressions that they're giving you are really for my benefit, not how they're actually feeling, what they want to communicate, or even more, being true to themselves. Mr. Table Topics Master?
Thank you, Rick. That was good. I didn't know what you would do with that. And I know exactly what you're talking about. The last question I'm going to ask today is, what makes you smile? I'm going to ask our guests to participate. So I'll call him Tom Ziegler. What makes you smile?
Well, the number one thing that makes me smile is my young daughter, who's 8 years old, Callie Ziegler. Just watching her and how she acts in the world and how she treats people and just the little grown-up that she's become so quickly brings a smile to my face. And I'm a very religious person myself too. Another thing that makes me smile is God. Just thinking about His wonderful ways and how He treats us all and loves us all also makes me smile. So those are the two things that really make me smile the most in this world.
Thank you, Tom. At this point, I'm going to turn control of our meeting back to our Toastmaster. Madam Toastmaster?
Thank you, Steve. Great questions. I really liked those. They're questions that anyone can answer, which is really nice. Sometimes people do table topics and they give you something that is just impossible, but I really like those. Next up, we have our prepared speeches. And our first speaker for today, Bobby Harris, is doing Competent Communicator Project number 7, Research Your Topic. The title of her speech is My Project is 6 months behind impossible. My project is 6 months behind impossible, Bobby Harris.
Thank you, Emily. My project is 6 months behind. Impossible. Toastmasters, guests, viewing audience. In some environments, you may even hear someone say, my project is a year overdue. Again, I say impossible. In a true project management environment, it does not allow for a project to be 6 months behind. So let me tell you how that works in a company that enforces project controls. And I'll tell you in layperson's terms. I've been a project manager for over 20 years, and I've worked in a variety of industries and many major corporations. So I'm not explaining how any specific company does this. I'm just going to give you an aggregate of my experience as a project manager for 20 years and direct you to pmi.org for more information about how successful projects are managed. So a large part of a project manager's job is to get status from team members and to provide status to senior leadership, reporting the health of your project in colors. Green, meaning a go, that all measurable aspects of the project are running on target. Measurable aspects are primarily scope, timeline, and cost. I have passed out a handout that shows the key ingredients that need to be in good health for your project so that you can be considered in the green. It shows scope, timeline, and cost, but the center focus of your project is keeping a mindful eye on maintaining high quality. So you may be building widgets according to the required scope, and that's the scope and nothing but the scope, and then you're in the green. Now, if the timeline was built, refined, and approved, then you're operating on a baseline schedule, and hereafter you're required to manage to that timeline. So if you're on schedule, you're still green. And if you have an approved and communicated scope with a baseline timeline schedule, then you most likely are identifying the costs. So your project may be producing these widgets and you are purchasing material from an external source. Well, that helps you define your costs. And in the case of a technology project where you're only using internal labor, you're estimating a dozen or more people's time on the project that will engage in the work of completing the project. So if these costs have been estimated and approved, you're still in the green. Now, if you identify scope that was missed, or if you have a slip in the timeline, or you identify unforeseen or increased costs, you have to report the project in amber. That's yellow in some companies. So if your amber project can get back on track in 1 to 2 weeks, you could report that your project is amber, but it's trending green. But if you're not able to make up the miss, or you will continue to operate behind schedule, you must report your project red. And red equals bad. So then you must create a go to green plan, where you will offer up solutions on how to get the project back to green and in controls, in part of the project controls. And that means in scope, and only the approved scope, and on schedule, and that's back on track with the approved timeline, and on budget, and that's managing costs without surprises. Now, we've said that it's impossible for a project to be 6 months or a year behind, so here's why. Your Go to Green plan will suggest approval to reduce the scope or accept a risk. Then that will help you get back on track. Or it may suggest that you add people to the project to get the new work done in a shorter timeline, but that increased the costs. Or it may suggest that you just need to extend the timeline to get all the work done. Any one of those options needs to be carefully considered and most likely will have to be presented in front of a tough panel of change approvers who are going to challenge you and enlist you to invoke creative thinking to not have to adjust any of these three critical items. But the decision has to be made. And once your option is selected, you set about reworking the timeline or reworking the budget and redefining the scope if necessary. And your change approval approves changing the date. So you're operating on a revised baseline schedule with a revised due date. Now in our example, approving the new schedule puts you back in green in your project. So I invite you to go out to pmi.org to review other proven project management tips and techniques for keeping your project in green. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Let's take a minute for evaluation time before we go to our next speaker.
Name an effective political leader in history who couldn't speak well.
I take pride in the word
There aren't any.
Because when it comes to a disease,
Freedom requires leadership, and leadership requires oratory. You have to speak to be heard.
I have a dream.
It's all about personal growth and guts.
Never give in. Never, never, never.
Our next speaker today is a guest from another Toastmasters club, the Loveland Speakeasy Club. And we're always happy to have guests come and speak. But today, our guest is practicing his speech for the World Championship of Public Speaking semifinals at the conference in Las Vegas next month. So we're honored to have him here and get a preview of his speech. The title of the speech is Phil Barth, Act Your Age, Phil Barth. Thank you.
I'm floating on a jet ski in the Atlantic Ocean. Sitting behind me is my wife, Beth. On a jet ski over here, my teenage son, Kenny. On a jet ski over here, my son, Joe. All of a sudden, Joe takes off at 57 miles an hour. Kenny takes off at 67 miles an hour. So Beth and I take off at 27 miles an hour. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters here and on the web, when exactly did I turn old? Now, I felt young when I woke up that morning. Still felt young when I was standing on the beach next to my wife. But then, it happened. At one point, I used to think that it was a sign of weakness to cry. At one point, I used to think you couldn't lie by staying silent. And at one point, I thought I was young. Then I had kids. And in this case, one of those kids, my son Kenny, came up to me and he said, "Mom, Dad, can we rent jet skis?" I thought, well, jet skis? No. Oh, that's something I would have done years ago. I'm at the point in life where I need to slow down. I need to act my age. After all, I'm 50. Have you ever had a moment where you say, "It just became my parents"? I'm 50 was my dad's favorite line. Anytime we want to do something fun, exciting, dangerous, he'd look at us and say, "Well, I'm 50. You go on without me." But then I remembered something Dad said when I turned 45. He said, "Phil, growing up, how many times did I tell you, act your age, Phil Barth?" You still don't. And I'm proud of that. Son, you just seize the day. You know how to live. I wish I was more like that. I thought, if Dad had to do it over again, would he ride a jet ski? But before I could finish, I thought my wife said, jet skis, that sounds like fun. What do you think, Phil? Well, I think it's one thing to act old in front of my kids. They expect it. But to act old in front of my wife? I think not. I said, jet skis, yeah. Oh, I'm in. I'm excited. Got down to the dock and I saw the jet ski and I said, I'm 50. I was just about to tell him, you go on without me, when I saw a sign on the wall. I read that sign and I said, I have to ride this jet ski. I just have to. Have you ever read something that just moved you to take action? I will always remember what was on that sign. No refunds. So I'm on that jet ski just tearing it up at 27 miles an hour. And even at 27, we're bouncing around to the left and right. I'm saying, why? Saltwater is splashing in my mouth. I'm going to die. Behind me, my wife is holding on for dear life. I can feel her body pressed up against me in a giant hug. And I say, you know, it's not all bad. So I accelerate to 28. And 2 minutes later, we take a floating break. Fellow Toastmasters, no matter how old you are, no matter how old you feel, there will come a chance for you to not act your age. My chance came as I was taking my break. Kenny pulled up on his jet ski, splashed a little salt water on me and said, hey, old man, want a race? Well, the inner teenager took over and we took off. And something really neat happened. At 50 miles an hour, it got smoother and I felt younger. I felt like I was 30. I accelerated to 55. I felt like I was 25. At 60, 20. For every 5 miles an hour faster, I felt 5 years younger. If I'd gone any faster, I might have needed diapers. But as that speedometer inched towards 70 miles an hour, I said, I am having a blast. I feel young again. I need to thank Kenny for this, and if I could only catch up to him, I would. I lost the race. But I gained a lesson. See, I always thought as I got older, I needed to slow down and act my age. It turned out slowing down and acting my age was making me older. That jet ski ride was 2 years ago, and from that moment till now, I have looked for ways to not act my age. Here's what I've discovered. It doesn't always need to be something big like a jet ski or, God forbid, jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. It can be something as small as playing a game of extreme tic-tac-toe with my son or watching a cartoon with my other son. And when I do that and refuse to act my age, I laugh more. I learn more, and I live more. Not only that, it rubs off on others. I got my dad to ride a roller coaster. Sure, it was the kiddie coaster with his little grandson, and yeah, he did write me out of the will afterwards for that one moment. He did not act his age. Ladies and gentlemen, can I suggest that today, you look for a way to not act your age. There's no time like the present, and there's no place like Las Vegas. Life comes with no refunds. But it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter how old you feel. You still have time to laugh more, to learn more, and yes, to live more, if you simply refuse to act your age.
Let's take a minute for evaluating Bill.
Name an effective political leader in history who couldn't speak well.
I take pride in the word it's been.
There aren't any.
Because when it comes to a disease
Freedom
like this,
requires leadership, and leadership requires oratory. You have to speak to be heard.
I have a dream.
It's all about personal growth and guts.
Never give in. Never, never, never.
Next, we'll have the evaluation portion of our meeting, and it will be run by our general evaluator, Rick Davis.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Our first evaluation will be by Steve Aaronholtz, who will evaluate Bobby's speech for the day. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator, fellow Toastmasters, our honored guests, and those looking in from home. And Bobby, your speech that you presented today was to build on things you've learned from the preceding 6 speeches in the Competent Communicator Manual. And it was to select a subject of importance to the audience that would require research for you to be able to present it to us. It also encouraged you to use body language, vocal variety, some of the other nonverbal enhancements to your presentation. I have a variety of questions here to answer on your speech, so I'm going to go over some of these and I'll finish it up when I'm back in my seat. Overall, I thought your speech reflected a substantial body of knowledge that I think comes from a person who's done project management for quite some time. I liked your opening where you used vocal variety and you said, my project is 6 months behind. Impossible. One of the things I think you could have added to provide a little more impact with your speech is a little more body language, a little more moving around. I know you were using your notes some to keep from getting off track, but I think that you could have used your hands for gestures when you were talking about the green and amber and red status of a project and the things that then can be changed to bring it back on track. For example, the timeline could be stretched out, or the costs would increase, or something about quality, that we're not going to sacrifice quality, and then use a pause. Sort of punctuate your presentation with some of those things. Let me see. There was one question here that I'm not sure about. It said, did the speaker vary the types of support material? And you'll see my response is that I'm not sure because I'm not exactly sure what they're asking for. But varying the types of support material, I don't know whether that would be maybe citing some information from a professional project management organization or citing a specific study in addition to drawing upon the wealth of knowledge that you've acquired as a project manager, because I wasn't real sure about that. But with a lot of your speeches, I always learn something. And having projects myself at work, I think, okay, yeah, it is impossible for these to get that far behind because if nothing else, it's been allowed to get to that point. I'm looking forward to hearing your next speech. Mr. General Evaluator?
Thank you, Steve. Our next evaluator is Rick Barron. He's going to evaluate Phil's speech. My understanding is that Phil would like everybody to have some input after Rick gets done with his evaluation. Rick Barron?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Rick. What a substantial task. I think we've all heard those words at one point in time. Richard Maurice Barron Jr., act your age. As the oldest of 3 kids, I heard that quite often. Was something that I became in tune with. And so the title right away, Phil, allows us to all go back and relive those memories. If we did not experience it, we probably had an older sibling or somebody else that we know that was able to do that. It's obvious. from your presentation up here that this is a speech that is well rehearsed, well written, and well practiced. There's a couple of things that I'd like to point out that I think may help you as you go through this. Specifically related to pauses. I know there's a lot of stuff that you're trying to cram in here, that the speech has a lot of value and there's a lot of content. But for instance, floating on a jet ski, the pause wasn't long enough there for me. Floating on a jet ski, I've been on one, and I wanted to go back to that time, and it started and I wasn't able to go do that. In addition, rent jet skis, pause wasn't long enough there either for me. It was like we've all had one of those things where jump out of a perfectly good airplane, I want to romance that for a little while, right? And then say, heck no, right? So same thing. Rent jet skis, if I have rented them before, I want to respond. If not, I want to romance that a little while before you answer. There were a number of spaces or times in this speech where you paused really well. Unfortunately, operating the camera and trying to take notes, I couldn't jot them all down. But go back through when we give you the recording. Take a look at them and put yourself in our spot. And as you think through the audience, hearing it for the very first time, allow us to actually live that adventure. The speech development was outstanding. The speech value, the whole concept of laugh more, learn more, live more, you brought that all together. Adding the character of your father was a genius because all of us have somebody like that in there that we can relate to as well. Very direct and assure of yourself as you're up here. And I think the challenge is going to be, as you already know, taking it from a venue this size to one that's 10 times this size. And that's really, we need to find you some places like that to practice. Mr. General Evaluator.
Okay, I'd like to invite people to come up here and to provide further feedback to Phil. Does anybody have any thoughts? Michelle?
Thank you. Phil, fantastic topic. I love the fact that you were pointing at the sign, and I turned around to look. Like, I thought there was a sign there, so you really did a good job of doing that. Love that idea. The only other thing I was thinking is, and I'm sure you probably have put some thought into this, you could do a really funny costume with the idea of being on a jet ski. Think of an old person at the beach sometimes. It could be humorous. So maybe think about that. I'm sure you have put some thought into it. I didn't expect you to show up today in really short swim trunks or anything of that sort, but I think that you could really do something humorous with that element. That's it.
Anyone else? Would you like to, Steve, would like to say something? Some feedback? No. I will. Emily?
I really love that speech and your magnetism when you're up here. I think you do a great job with that. I saw the speech before already at the contest, so I think it's harder for me to be as objective as someone who just saw it for the first time. But in your first one, you mentioned people like Colonel Sanders that did new things when they were old, and I really liked that part, and I was disappointed you took that out. So I think you have your father in there, which that was good as well, but I really like the examples of people who started new things when they're in their 70s and really old. So that's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bobby, you want to say something?
Thank you. If nothing else, today was an excellent example of how someone that is brand new to giving speeches and still relies on paper notes to someone who is an accomplished speaker and ready to go on to a challenge in the convention. So I truly appreciated having an example of such excellence. I get an example of excellence in our own club all the time, but it really is helpful for me to be able to see someone who knows the material so well that they're not worried about getting tongue-tied. And that is why I rely on my notes, because I'm sure that I'm going to mess up some very important point that I wanted to make. But this story unfolded so naturally and really just sucked me into perfection and perfecting the way that I do my speeches. So I'll be learning from you as time goes on, and I really appreciate getting to hear that speech. I won't be in Las Vegas. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're gonna go on to the next thing, which is Michelle is going to give her grammarian all-counter report.
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. What a really well-grammared, and I don't even know if that's the word, so I could probably dock myself, meeting this was today. There were two uses of the word of the day by Rick Barron and by Steve. I apologize if I missed anybody else, but those are the two that I calculated. Emily, you had a couple, which is, and from, and I got from you twice, but you had a lot of speaking portion today, so great job. Steve, another A+. Bobby, the only thing I picked up was you said invoke, so you did the en part of it twice, and you really liked the word so. So you tend to, even though it didn't look like it was out of place, you tend to just, you could probably eliminate that in some places. Phil, no grammatical errors. You got tongue-tied one time, but it was, I mean, you know this speech like the back of your hand, so fantastic job. Rick Davis, I caught a the, and a what can, so you kind of did a little double clutching there. Tom, our guest, I didn't catch anything from him. And then Rick Barron, I caught 3 in your evaluation for Phil. But other than that, great meeting. Oh, I had a lot of grammatical errors and I didn't count them, so I gave myself an A+ as well.
Timers report. The grammarian, Michelle, took 56 seconds. Our first speaker, well, actually, table topics. I didn't time myself. I give myself a minute and 30 seconds. I don't know. Michelle, 1:10. Rick Barron, 1:10. And Tom was 29 seconds. The first speaker, Bobby, 5 to 7 minutes. You were 5 minutes and 57 seconds, so you're well within time. Phil, 5 to 7 minutes, 6 minutes and 34 seconds, so you're well within the time. Evaluator 1, Steve, was 3 minutes and 2 seconds, and Rick Barron was 2 minutes and 51 seconds. I didn't time any other people that were up here. Grammarian, Michelle, 1 minute and 15. So we're doing well on our timing. As a general evaluator, I think we had a good meeting. I think it's a new environment. I guess you guys have met here twice before, and it's trying to get set up and figured out and all that good stuff. It's just a matter of having done it enough times that we sort of know where we're going to be and where we're going to go. But I think we did a good job. The only suggestion I have is, I guess we get so dependent on Carol. We didn't have our agendas today, and that can be really a serious issue, especially if we have an area governor come visit us or something like that.
Area director.
They're changing it now to area director. I guess I've been out of the loop for the last 3-4 months. So I think everybody did a great job. I really appreciate everybody's efforts to get us on track, and I will turn it back to the president, Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. Great round of applause for our Toastmaster today, Emily Garrett. As Rick mentioned, what a great meeting. Great participation, a lot of fun, and we hope that you guys looking in will want to check us out. You can find out more about our club on www.tvtoastmasters.com. Again, the first Thursday of the month at 6 p.m., the third Saturday of the month at 9 a.m. 10 a.m. Again, thank you. Thanks to our guests, to Phil, to Tom, and we look forward to seeing you soon. This concludes our meeting.